Hi, my name is Hayden Reese. I apologize. The camera is a bit far away. I had to set it up over there. So the things on the screen might be a little bit harder to see, and for that I apologize, but I will do my best. So let's begin. This is my Ell Strategy Demonstration. So for the first one, I like to start off with number 2, which was visual scaffolding. So basically what visual scaffolding is an approach to which the language used in the instruction is made more understandable. And it's done by displaying drawings or photographs that allow students to connect spoken English words to visual images being displayed. And they'll be displayed, you can either bring in physical copies or you can use the computer to project images onto the board. And the educator will build a hard copy as well as a digital file, so a physical folder as well as a digital folder, to collect visuals that can be easily accessed throughout the year. And that's honestly probably the most important part of visual scaffolding is easy access. So that's why it's important to have a physical copy as well as a digital copy. In the case you can't access your digital copy, in the case you lose your digital copy, you can easily turn to your hard copy and vice versa. So having that on both ends will be extremely helpful, and that's just the way to stay best prepared. So here are some visual scaffolding resources. I wanted to take these from the textbook itself in order to connect my project with the textbook itself. So taking resources from the text. And as you can see, there's internet image resources, there's children's artwork, vacation videos, line drawings from students in the classroom. You could have a whole day where students just draw and then you collect those drawings to use in the future. Or you can give them back at the end of the year and have your next year's students do the same thing. Just repeat the process. So now we'll move on to strategy number 4, which was total physical response, TPR, and total physical response storytelling, TPRS. So what this is it's an approach to second language acquisition based on first language acquisition research. So based on what the student already knows. Educators build on the natural sequence of language acquisition by gradually, that's the key word, introducing commands, acting them out as they say them, then gradually acting out will cease. That activity will stop, leaving only the verbal command as a response left. So the key would be to start with an action and then over the year develop it along with said action, and then begin to take away the physical action. So all you'll get is just the verbal response. So the educator will choose a vocab word that that the students are struggling with and could use a little more help and reinforcement, and physicalize it. Then the educator will gradually, we don't want to rush, we don't want to put too many of these forward at once. We want it to be gradual. After some time, the physical aspect, like I said, will be dropped entirely. And what is left is simply the concept we were trying to reinforce in the first place. At which point the students are asked to display their knowledge through a variety of ways, like taking turns, demonstrating their retention. So basically what that means is once you're just left with the vocalization aspect, then at that point you can give them different activities, you can put them in different situations to where they could show that they know that, not the knowledge we were trying to reinforce. And they display that knowledge through completion of the activity. It could be something simple, it could be something complex, but the goal is to have them display, to vocalize just without the action. Hopefully they'll remember the action and they'll use that in helping them vocalize it. So now I'll stop recording so I can start my next section, which will be practical ideas for implementation. All right, So now we'll move on to our next section, which is practical ideas for implementation. So in the last section, I really just wanted to focus on what the concept was and really just kind of break it down in simple terms. And then in this section, I'm hoping to take those terms, strategies 2 and 4, and give you some practical ways we can implement them in the classroom. Because throughout the reading of the textbook, there are some strategies that are easier than others to implement in the classroom, and the ways in which you would implement them, depending on where you are, some may be more practical than others. So what I did was think about my future career and my future classrooms, what those would look like, and how I could implement these practices in those classrooms. So let's start with visual scaffolding. We will use picture word walls, and what my imagining of a picture word wall is I'll have students create a word wall with pictures corresponding to key vocabulary, and this vocabulary will be in English and in Spanish. That's just specifically for me and what my classrooms will look like. For example, if I'm teaching a lesson on food, including images of fruits and vegetables and even just like full complete dishes, alongside their labels in both English and the students' first languages, which more than likely would be Spanish. I just think that would be that's a great way to get students up out of their seats, to get them reaching around, to get them moving around, and they have that nice visual aspect. So when they think of the word in either English and or Spanish, they'll think of the image that they see up on the wall. And we could always leave the images up on the wall for maybe about a week, 2 weeks, not for the whole year, but just enough to where students can really look at them and get a good idea of, okay, this represents this. And then for my second one, I said graphic organizers with visuals, of course. So what we would do is we would use concept maps, Venn diagrams, or flow charts that incorporate icons or pictures. Similar to this one, using familiar icons. For example, when teaching a story, we can include images representing the beginning, middle, and end stages to aid comprehension. So we could take several images and kind of pepper them throughout the book. And at the end, we'll have the beginning, the middle, the end. And in those sections, we'll have the individual images. So hopefully the students will be able to link the images from one section to the other. That would be the final goal. So now let's move on to TPR and TPRS. For my first example, I said action commands. What I would do is I would teach verbs or prepositions through physical movement. Get them out of their seats, full body, get them moving. Especially when they're sitting there in the desk all day, and you can tell they're ready to move. So, for example, I said when learning stand up, sit down, jump, simple things like that, we'll have them model it and action to have the students imitate it. That's real simple. Jump, sit down, we'll have the students sit down, stand up, just things that they would hear probably just in every day. I should have wrote down more, but I feel like you get the gist. And then for my second activity, I said role-playing scenarios. We'll use real-life scenarios: grocery store, laundromat, courthouse. Just probably not things, just different scenarios they might encounter in the future. Things to where knowing the vocabulary, knowing the language used would be important. Like shopping at a store, where students will pick up items, usually just probably pictures that I've printed out, or maybe I'll make like little foam noodle food, something really easy and really, really simple, but something fun and engaging. And I'll have them pretend to pay and use English phrases like, how much is this? Using English and Spanish will definitely be a big part of this, and it will be a big part of all of these, if that wasn't already obvious. But these are two four really great examples of how I think I would implement these in my classroom. Here's actually figure 2.2. This is applications for total physical response. So this is from strategy 4. This is from the textbook. I just thought I would add another thing in there to really connect this to the text. So as you can see, some applications for total physical response would be number words, color words, shapes, body parts, prepositional phrases, directions. These are all things that can be very easily made into an action. And then in turn, that action will help them remember the concept. Especially something like directions, up, down, things that can vary, you can associate hand gestures with, and even the full body, down, up, to the left, to the right, something to get them moving, get them engaged, and get them thinking, oh, I'm moving, this is what I'm gonna associate that with. So I thought that was important to add as well. All right, so now we've come to our final section, and this is my mock activity. So I was asked to combine these two strategies and make an activity that would be both engaging and meaningful to the class. And I figured that since I'd be put in my future placement next semester would be in an elementary school, I figured that it would only be fitting to do an activity for my future elementary school ELL students. So this is my activity. So it consists of an interactive storyboard. So basically, students will use a large storyboard with movable visual elements. That's a key part, movable. They can rearrange and combine with physical actions. So for example, I will be teaching the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's a classic story, everybody knows it, so I feel like that would be something to just, and even if they don't know it, that's a nice easy introduction into some short stories. And so I'll be using images for the students to physically act out. So there'll be the visual, and then there'll be the physical. This integrates visual comprehension with movement for engagement and retention. What I just said, but just a little fancier. Because having one without the other would not really make too much sense. So putting them together will really provide a nice, meaningful activity that I feel like my students would enjoy. So I'm gonna be the educator, and you will be the students, the audience. So I'll just play like you're the students. Before we begin, I really thought I would cover the state standards that are met by this activity. ELLs will communicate for social and instructional purposes within the school setting. Standard 4, ELLs will communicate information, ideas, and concepts necessary for academic success in language arts. Standard 3 is ELLs will read literary and informative texts necessary for academic success. And finally here at the bottom, standard 5, ELLs will write literary texts to meet grade level expectations, And I've provided an example for each. My example for standard 1 is students act out the scenes from Goldilocks and the Three Bears. They listen to teacher cues as pick up small bowl or lie on the big bed, and respond appropriately by movement or speaking. This builds their ability to follow instructions and engage in academic conversations. My example set for standard 4 is that during the activity, students describe actions such as Goldilocks eats the porridge, that's an action. Reinforcing vocabulary and sentence structure relevant to storytelling. My example for standard 3 is that using the storyboard, students read captions like, "This is Goldilocks' bowl," or "Big Bear," sorry, I should have put Big Bear. I'm trying to move away. I'm not trying to move away, but in this example, I wanted to use something like I do in the future, so use big bear, medium bear, little bear, just as a preference. This is big bear's chairs is too hard, excuse me. Associating text with visuals. This improves word recognition and comprehension. Finally, my final example is that after acting out the story, students write simple sentences or phrases about what happened, such as Goldilocks sat in the big chair. Visuals and physical engagement aid memory and language production. So I just wanted to cover those before getting into the lesson to show you that I made sure my bases were rounded and that I covered as many standards as I really could in this activity. So let's begin. They had each a bowl for their porridge. A little bowl, little, for little wee bear, a middle sized bowl for the middle sized bear, and a great big bowl for the great big bear. Bowl in English, in Spanish, bol. So we have our little bowl, our medium bowl, and our big bowl. And the bears would eat the porridge. Eat the porridge. And they had each a chair to sit in. A little chair for the little wee bear, a middle-sized chair for the middle-sized bear, and a great big chair for the great big bear. Now, chair in English, in Spanish, silla. And what would we do with the chairs? We sit in the chairs. Chairs, we sit. And they had each a bed to sleep in. A little bed for little wee bear, a middle-sized bed for middle-sized bear, and a great big bed for the great big bear. What I really hope to do with this activity is use my vocal inflections to really drive home the different sizes so that whenever they read middle-sized, they'll think middle-sized. Or when they see wee bear, they'll think wee. Or great big. I really want them to try and associate not only with the visuals and the actions, but also the inflection. So we have bed in English, in Spanish, cama. And we have our little bed, wee bed, our middle bed, and our great big bed. And what would we do in the beds? We sleep. What do we do in the beds? We sleep. So if we were to run through it again, eat, eat, sit, sit, we sleep, we sleep. All right, so I just like to address some final thoughts. I really enjoyed this project. There were a lot of strategies in that book that I really liked, and honestly, those were two of them that I really liked. Now, I won't lie to you, this project, especially being for an elementary school, it was a little bit easier to design. And I think that if I really wanted to challenge my students, which I do plan on doing in the future, there are definitely ways to which I could make that a little more complex. And that's what I like so much about those strategies, is that they can be tweaked to the individual needs of the students. So I would start with something like that, and depending on how they respond, it could either be, I could either leave it as it is, or I could step it up and make it a little more challenging. Not only that, but you could implement these two strategies in high school, in middle school. It goes all the way up. You would just need individualized tweaking at each level to make it appropriate for the audience. But that's really why I like those two strategies, is because they can really be implemented in any grade level and at any level of complexity, rather just being simple or a little more complex, a little more challenging. I had a fun time enjoying this, and I hope you learned something. I thought it was really important to connect to the textbook and to make sure I added the state standards in there that were met, just so it was it showed that I really was trying to be meaningful with my example. So I appreciate your time, and I hope you learned something.